just get paid. I want to play. The vibes is right. I wanna hug up tight. No time to waste. I wanna work my ways. So come on up, babes. Give me a taste. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub and love up. I wanna rub and kiss up. I wanna rub and jam up. I wanna rub and rub up. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Pulling on.
If you are looking to have your statutory declaration, affidavit of income, identity, damage or lost passport, lost license, tenancy agreement, agreement of settlement, power of attorney, last will and testament, and certification of documents, then you need to visit the Alistair Collins firm, located at the Killian Mall, 162 Lamaha Street, in Georgetown, between Camp and Waterloo Street. Alistair Collins is a commissioner of oaths and a justice of the peace. Make certain you visit him or call for more information at 649-6410 or 685-6448 or 503-1451. And there's adequate parking available. Go down to the Alistair Collins firm and have all of your legal issues settled and brought to the fore. Alistair Collins Firm. Contact them at Alistair Collins Firm.
Hello, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you, so call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
All right, good evening. I almost got caught off guard. Let me first begin by apologizing for not being on last evening. And usually when I'm not on, I know, look, I'll be presumptuous. All of you got sleepless nights because you wonder where I am. And just to let you know that it pains me too sometimes when I cannot be on with you, because I know you look forward for the truth. You can go to any other the PPP propaganda programs to get the truth, right? You get the truth from us. And you know, when I say us, you know exactly who us are. But you can get the truth from them. No matter how much they try to imitate us, they just do not have the us-like personality to do that. Because when they are on, it's always about them and prove a point and who this and who that, and kind of like worse than a fish market. And I'm not going to say a fish market mentality, because there are some very reasonable and good fish market people, whether at Port Morant Market, whether at Mackenzie Market, Wisma Market, or Border, Stabrook Market, East Lepet, wherever it is, they have good fish vendors. But when they host their show, take a keen look, stop for a moment, drink some water, and watch. It's worse than a fish market. It makes no sense. It's always to prove a point that they did this and they make this thing and did this. We don't do that on this show. We deal with issues. We expose corruption. wherever those corruption may be. We expose them, whether it's in the installed regime, whether it's some private sector individual, whether it's people who are presenting themselves as businessmen. We deal with those sort of issues, or whether it is corruption deep within the Guyana police force. We are there to talk about those matters. We don't deal with personalities. We just don't do that at all. If we want to deal with personalities, maybe we can just dedicate a half hour sometime to talk and interview those guys who go out and ply their trade in the evenings at the cathedral. Now that I get your attention, my name is Mark Benja, and welcome to Straight Up. This evening I have a guest, no stranger to you guys. His name is Nigel Hughes. He's an attorney at law. He doesn't like to use the term to describe him as a prominent attorney at law, but he's an attorney at law. He has been around for quite some time. And this is what I said to Nigel privately. I said, Nigel, we knew each other when we were young, but we have gotten all the way to this part to still continue to do what we are doing. But in this case, it's not about me, it's Nigel. Nigel has been representing people for God in heaven knows when. He does a lot of pro bono cases. He's done a lot of pro bono cases for me for over 20 years. He's never asked for a cent. And so when I read recently that Nigel Hughes is back again to his old good trouble, and what I mean by good trouble, I mean really, really good trouble, as the late Congressman John Lewis said. When I heard that Nigel Hughes has taken up the matter with a police sergeant who is not in hot waters, but he's speaking out his interpretation of corruption, covering up, particularly about a case that you guys are familiar with. It has been around with us for over a year. And if you notice, back then, Ben said, there's no motive in this death of Fergundes. This is not about Fergundes or whoever he was. This is about justice. Family members always want justice. But when you have any high-profile matter, any case where individuals within the Guyana police force are accused of cover-ups, then is when we have problems. In fact, not only problems, we have serious problems. With me this evening, again, let me welcome attorney at law, prominent attorney. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Mark. Always a pleasure and a privilege to listen to your entertaining introductions. How are you? It's been a while.
I am great, thank you. Yes, I'm around, and you're looking sharp, Nigel, even though we knew each other like 20-something years ago when we were younger. We're still good looking, but you are looking good, looking well in shape. How do you keep yourself looking all fit and well in shape? Let us know.
Mark, I wish I could lie to you. I am not in shape at all. I should be getting in shape. So I thank you for your generosity. You're always gracious, and even in the face of contradictory evidence, you're kind. So thank you, but
you
nowhere
didn't give
near
me a
in shape.
chance to say in shape intellectually and otherwise. I wasn't talking physically. I didn't want to be dishonest to our listeners. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, well, even the mental exercises get a little tiring. How have you been? I see you said you were absent last night. Sorry about that.
Yes, I was absent, and a lot of people sent me messages asking where it is that I went, but I couldn't publicly say it for them to know my business. Sometimes I deserve some personal private time. Nigel, I wouldn't say where I was last night. I wouldn't say that. But I was busy. Always a pleasure to have you on, Mr. Hughes. Even though most of the times we are here under these same circumstances. We never get to meet to get a beer or a mobby or something like that. It is always under these circumstances. We've got to change it sometime soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Guyana is always in trouble whenever we meet.
Absolutely. Let me also take this opportunity to congratulate you publicly. You have an addition to the family in terms of a lawyer, your son, and then I believe your daughter as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Oh, yeah. My son, yeah. He just graduated earlier with May this year from Georgetown University. Thank you so much. You're very kind.
You're welcome. Congratulations again. Nigel, let's move on to some business. The first thing I want to move on to is you recall this here back in 2015. You were
Yep.
on this case. A lot of times we deal with individuals who have been incarcerated for a little piece of spliff, little piece of marijuana. And these youngsters, mainly youngsters, are dumped into the prisons for 2 years and 3 years, and their lives, in some instances, basically just messed up because of regimes not wanting to decriminalize certain amount, a small amount of marijuana. The rest of the world gone ahead of us, and we're still behind. What is your take on that? We're still at square one, sir.
Mark, it's exceedingly disappointing that what we're. God, when was it? I think it was sometime in 2015, 16. You helped us craft that piece of legislation that would have amended the Psychotropic Drugs and Narcotics Act. Um, you came to us on several occasions to help people who were in difficulties. Too many occasions, I would say. And we're in 2022 August, and no change. I gather that they passed legislation to facilitate the cultivation of hemp, but they have not yet touched the Narcotics Act, which is a shame. It means we're putting more and more, invariably young people, into the criminal justice system, and worse, as you know, into the prisons where, that's a life-altering experience. Sad, really sad.
Very, very sad indeed. And the rest of the world gone right ahead in front of us. And in Guyana, they're still incarcerating people, mainly young people, for just a small amount of spliff. Unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. Mr. Nigel Hughes with us. We want to move on to other things. I saw this line, Mr. Hughes, where people were lining up for sugar. And I got to be honest with you, Nigel. I was actually peeping to see if I'll see you and Kathy in this line for sugar. What is your take, though, on this year, where we are producing sugar in Guyana, 2022, and persons are lining up for these sort of things in Guyana? Your take, sir.
Well, the first thing is, you say we're producing sugar. I think we have the lowest production level ever of sugar. So it is our production of sugar has decreased significantly. Having said that, I don't understand why we would have a shortage in Guyana at all. It's the reality is that sugar has not been competitive for over 30 years. We have not been able to produce sugar at a competitive price. Unfortunately, now in Guyana, we can't even produce any sugar. We've had the lowest production output ever, I believe, in the last crop. It is clear that it has to be subsidized as an industry. We've just seen that in the request from the Minister of Finance for additional funds just to maintain it. I think the sugar industry is more, social payments, social support, social policy. But the fact that we can't even get sugar in Guyana really is an awful indictment.
How do you feel when you drive around though, or you walk around, especially, I know where your law offices are located. Lots of folks within that community, they have a lot of respect for you, they look up to you. Have they been complaining in terms of cost of living recently?
I think, Mark, to be fair, everybody's been complaining about more cost of living. I was in the supermarket the other day, and my wife wasn't in the country, so I had to go find food for myself. And I actually saw a sweet pepper for $3,000. I swear to God, I couldn't believe it. $3,000 for sweet pepper, unbelievable. The prices are ridiculous. I mean, everything from the car you drive, filling the tank, anything in the market. Unbelievable.
I'm glad that you actually went out, but and finally got some stuff so that you can go home and cook. I know on your way home you just stop and buy some puri and you never cook. So Nigel, don't bluff us. But cost of living.
It was a salad. It was a salad.
Just a salad. Yeah, and that sweet pepper costs a lot. Can you imagine? What's the usual price for that sweet pepper, though?
Um, it certainly will be $3,000. I mean, I figure sweet pepper shouldn't cost you more than what, I don't know, $400 or $500, I imagine. But I don't have a comparator. It wasn't there, but this was just unacceptable. Why are you paying what, 15 US dollars for a sweet pepper? It's crazy.
Absolutely ridiculous. Next time, I'm sure maybe other places you might be able to get a reasonable price. I'll give Andrew's Supermarket a plug. They just opened their new location there. Check them out on Rob Street there, Nigel. We are supposed to be an oil-rich country, billions and billions of dollars. What is your take on how some of that money is being spent?
Mark, if I said I was anything other than disappointed with us across the board, this is not disappointed with just the party in power, I'm just very disappointed with us as a generation and our inability to manage this good fortune that we've had. The lack of planning for the future, and when I say future, I mean long-term future, 10 years. How are we managing the revenues that are coming in? What are going to be the foci of our economic development? What are the alternative areas that we are going to develop, and to what level? So you hear a lot of very broad generalistic statements like agriculture. The reality is, to have a real serious competitive agricultural enterprise, you got to have something that's over 10, 15,000 acres producing a single crop. We have never had that other than sugar. And I haven't heard what are the practical steps that are being taken to allow Guyanese farmers to be able to get part of that 31 or 32 billion US dollar food import bill for the Caribbean. How are we beginning to standardize the production of whatever fruits and vegetables we're dealing with? What are the cold storage plans, the marketing plans? How are we actually getting farmers into large scale production? We're not talking about, everybody planting a little 15-acre plot. And we haven't had that sort of discussion on economic development either. I mean, it's a given that our infrastructure is small. So any government worth their salt would spend money in infrastructure. The question is, what are the long-term plans for development? Energy. We've had talk about the gas to shore project, but I haven't seen the feasibilities on that compared to other forms of energy. And so we're going ahead, and every time we have a new idea, we promote it as if it's the best thing since sliced bread, without any actual analysis being done of the feasibility, the cost, the long term. What is the marketplace going to be like in 10 years? What's it going to be like in 15 years? What are the likely shocks that are going to come in the next, 6-7 years? In terms of the rate of development, looking again at where the shore bases are going to be. So we've had a delay in the commencement of the construction of the fixed span bridge over the Demerara River. Is it that we've taken the decision that the next 3 to 4 shore bases will be in the Demerara River? We have now discovered the folly of putting the bridge in Berbice at the mouth of the river, because it restricts the development of shore bases further south in the Berbice River, and I'm not sure what's happening in the Essequibo River. So there are a lot of serious discussions and decisions that have to be taken that affect the rate at which certainly the development of the oil industry takes place, and the public is none the wiser. And as you know, of course, we're fixed with some pretty serious inflation, and people are struggling. That's where we are. But my disappointment is really across the board. I think our generation, which is the one that is beginning to get to retirement, including yourself, we have certainly not managed our time at the wheel well.
Absolutely not. Nigel Hughes here, our guest. We have a few minutes more with Mr. Hughes. Let us touch quickly on Let us touch quickly. We have dealt with the economy and so forth. We are not hearing much about the elections, petitions, and so forth. Recently, at the Caribbean Court of Justice, one of the justices, I believe, said that these cases of elections matter should be expeditiously dealt with. Your take on this sluggishness, sir?
Oh, I think without a doubt, especially in a country like Guyana, where elections are literally life and death. I really don't think you can describe them in any other manner because literally, as you elect a new government, everybody who was appointed from the previous administration, they're out of a job. You know, people who got contracts before stop getting them, so it's a life and death situation. And one would have thought that, particularly in relation to challenges towards or challenges to the electoral process, that they would, by definition, have to be heard expeditiously. Without a doubt, you don't want to have an argument 2 to 3 years into a government about whether or not they're legitimately elected. It, it means literally for 2 years, nothing much is going to happen. Sure, you can have all this money passing through the economy and projects taking place, but for those people who perceive themselves excluded from the process, they're in limbo for a long time. And it means that the nation, as a coherent, singular body, doesn't really get an opportunity to move forward. So I think their honors in the CCJ were quite correct when they commented and pointed out the sluggishness in the system.
Let's move ahead. You were on, I believe, the last time we spoke, you were on the Orrin Boston's case, where you were representing the family on that murder of Mr. Boston, a businessman out there in Essequibo, by a serving member of the Guyana Police Force. I've noticed someone wants to know what's the status of that case.
Right. So the police officer who was charged with manslaughter, as you could remember, the preliminary inquiry is completed. The magistrate has committed that officer to stand trial at the next sitting of the assizes, which would take place in Essequibo for the offense of manslaughter. As you may recall, we advocated that what was on the record disclosed murder. The DPP charged manslaughter. Magistrate said there's enough evidence for manslaughter to go forward, and that is ostensibly fixed for the next sitting of the assizes in Essequibo. It'd probably take another year, 2 years before it actually comes up for hearing there. That's where that matter is.
Usually that's how it is. Mr. Hughes, before we move on to our main topic here, let's just welcome all our listeners again from around the world. Good evening and welcome to Straight Up on 107.1 FM. Good evening to the folks on the ground who are listening to us via their radios as well. I want to ask your opinion in terms of sluggishness, my term, in electoral matters at GCOM, with a new voters list, local government elections, and all these things. And we recently heard of the passing of the PBP representative on that commission, attorney at law Bibi Shadiq, who passed away. And the PBP swiftly rushed to her replacement and have a replacement there. Her replacement happens to be somebody who is no stranger to us. Let me, first of all, you as my guest, apologize for this photograph. And let me also apologize to our guest. But the PBP has, our listeners, the PBP has nominated this individual, Mr. Clement Rohi, as Ms. Shadiq's replacement. Your take on what's happening and what you've been reading at the Guyana Elections Commission, that ought to be well prepared for any elections, whether it's local government elections or general elections. Again, my apologies for this photograph. It is an election matter. He voted. He ducked his his middle finger in the ink, and he showed the world how he voted. Your take on what's happening at GCOM, sir?
Mark, I don't know if you'll allow me just 2 seconds to express my sympathies to the family of Ms. Shadiq, who passed on the weekend.
Sure.
The loss of a family member is always very difficult. And to Ms. Shadiq and the relatives of Ms. Shadiq, my most profound sympathies. I'm not surprised with the alacrity with which she was replaced. I would expect that, because I don't think the People's Progressive Party or any party would want to have a numerical disadvantage by having only two commissioners when the other side would have the majority. So I think it was expected that the replacement would take place pretty quickly because the decision's being taken, I suppose, whenever GCOM meets, and I'm not sure how often that is. So in relation to the appointment of Mr. Rohi as the replacement, that really is a PPP matter. If they think Mr. Rohi is the appropriate representative of that party to sit in the commission, that's a matter for them. I'm not in a position to second guess them. I think the structure of the Elections Commission is flawed, fundamentally flawed. You've got two political parties who have their representatives, which means that essentially that structure, what they bring forward, it would be not, this doesn't happen all the time, but would be primarily the positions of their party. I recently read a proposal that they should increase the number of non-political appointees. So now we have one who's the chair, to maybe let's say three. So you have three persons who are ostensibly independent or are selected as a result of a process that is likely to lead to greater independence of those persons. And you have those three persons plus the representatives of the party. And hopefully that process may, because of the increased presence of persons who may not be perceived as politically aligned, it may lead to better process. A lot of other countries, not only in the Caribbean, but everywhere else, they have an elections commission that does not have party representatives or persons that are appointed by political parties. We have some special circumstances here in Guyana, and this system that we have clearly has led to what we've got now. Insofar as the electoral list is concerned, I am of the view that we need a new electoral list. We can't, as a nation, it really is very unfortunate that every time we go to an election, there's a problem. And it doesn't matter who wins, there's always a problem. We need to at least migrate to the stage where the political activists, the party, the population have confidence in the electoral process. And it is evident. Whether you won, lost, or you were somewhere in between at the last election, the country cannot continue to go through this trauma every election. It disrupts everything. People don't have confidence in the system. Some people claim they win. Some people, we need to at least sort out the electoral process. That starts with a clean list. And then we have to make sure that all the processes are transparent. The commission is literally almost like a gunfight. And it's whoever's the last man standing that wins. So I think we've got to mature beyond the stage at which we are at the moment.
You end up in terms of it appears to be somewhat of a gunfight with what's happening, a political gunfight with what's happening in a GCOM there. I couldn't disagree with you of that description at all. Speaking of gunfight, here it is. We're going to talk about the situation with this guy, Mr. Fergundes, who was shot and killed. 20 bullets he received at the Palm Court sometime back.
Is it 20 or 21?
2021. Yeah. Yeah.
No, not 2021. Was it 20 or 21 bullets? I thought it was 21
bullets. His family members were out there. They were protesting. They were calling for justice. The police, lots of things we saw in the public, and the way in which the police was actually handling the matter became very questionable. And lots of members in the public suspected that this case would go absolutely nowhere, none whatsoever. There has been mention of individuals who were allegedly involved. In fact, the two shooters were supposedly identified according to what we heard then and what we're hearing now. And so the controversy was just too much. It was just too much. We were hearing about investigators pursuing the second suspect. And the second suspect we've heard happened, and it was described that the second suspect was actually a security guard, the security guard for this company owned by, or partnership by this guy, Mr. Mohammed, his first name, I believe. We'll get that shortly, but this was actually in the media. It was all over the place. The family wasn't getting any justice until now that we heard this detective, who was an investigator on that case. He came out publicly and he said exactly what he said, that he has accused a senior cop, and that senior cop happens to be Caesar, Superintendent Caesar, no stranger to controversy at all. So the cop has accused Mr. Caesar of being part of a cover up, allegations of bribery, so forth and so on. Lots of these things we've heard. After the detective came out publicly, said what he said, we heard that lawyers representing um, Azardine Mohammed, Caesar, and the suspect, who happens to be a security guard at Mohammed's enterprise, according to what we've heard, and the company has not denied that. They swiftly rush to sue Mr. Dion Bascom. They have sued him, and they threaten him that he has to make a public apology. Mr. Bascom said, no, he's not going to apologize. Then came his lawyer, his legal representative, Nigel Hughes. Mr. Hughes, what's happening with this case? Explain to us, please.
Okay, just a couple of things. They haven't actually filed proceedings against Mr. Bascom as yet. They sent what you call a pretrial demand for damages for what they allege there were defamatory statements made by him. So that's what the lawyer did on behalf of those three people. What's happening with the case? Well, Mark, this has been in the social media. I think everybody knows Mr. Bascom was arrested in a raid by Kanu, which sounds as if, depending on what position you take, while he was in custody, he felt he was in custody wrongfully. He had absolutely nothing to do there to do with the narcotics, and he released on Thursday a video, quite an animated video that went viral, in which he pointed out that there were several actions by identifiable police officers who were frustrating the investigation into the murder of Mr. Fergundes outside of Palm Court. After that went viral on Saturday, he had a more measured and detailed broadcast on social media, in which he actually identified in chronological order the allegations that he was making against the officers who were involved in the investigation, and the efforts that they had undertaken and the omissions that they had also facilitated that prevented the investigation of the murder of Mr. Fergundes to go forward. By the time he got to Saturday, of course, his life was in serious danger. He was threatened. We got consulted, I think it might have been either Saturday evening or early on Sunday, held an interview with him, and were of the view that his life was really in danger. A lot of people probably do not remember that back in 2018, the Protected Disclosures Act was passed, and that act essentially set up or created what should be the Protected Disclosures Commission, which is supposed to receive complaints from persons who are inside whistleblowing, and they have the power to provide witness protection and receive that evidence to protect whistleblowers. Now, Section 9 of the Act says that, look, you don't even have to go to that commission. Where there's a matter of national security or it affects national security, you can actually make that complaint directly to the president. And then the president has to set up under the Act a commission of inquiry based on the allegations. So I don't know if you allow me just a minute to give you the context here.
Go ahead. Yep, sir.
And it's important for Guyana, and for this reason. This is the center of Georgetown, an exceedingly popular nightclub in which not just locals go, but a lot of our foreign guests go to Palm Court. The location of this nightclub is less than probably 80 meters away from the president's residence. Doesn't matter who's occupying the president's residence. It's less than 80 meters from the president's residence. Everywhere throughout Georgetown, there are cameras mounted that can pick up any movement on the road, whether pedestrian, light traffic, heavy traffic. And so access to that technology is commonly available. The other thing that we have throughout the country, once you have access to cellular phones, and the cellular phones can be used, is a series of cell towers that actually record. If you're driving from here to Temeri, you drive past several cell towers, and the time you change from one cell tower to the other is accurately recorded. So, for example, if I was driving my car with my cell phone from Georgetown to Temeri, you can actually track every time I pass a cell phone. You can actually use the calculation of the time that I take to arrive at the rate at which I'm driving. But to come back to this case and why it's particularly damning for Guyana, a man gets shot and killed in front of several people in front of this popular night spot. There are cameras all over. It would have been pretty easy for the Guyana police force, because it's their cameras and the command center for those cameras is located in the Guyana police force, to track the movements of that car, not just after the shooting, but how it got to that location. So if that car came down, for example, came down North Road and then turned into Main Street, all that will be picked up by government cameras. Now, with all this technology, in front of Palm Court, cameras, cell phone towers, they found the burnt out car at Swan on the highway. With that technology, you can actually track where the car went, particularly if the occupants of the car were making cell calls. And when the car was actually burnt at Swan, those persons made calls to various people. So there's a lot of evidence that is there. And I make this point to say, if with all the technological capacity that we have, we can solve a murder in the middle of the street, 21 shots, including AK fire, 80 meters from the president's residence, with all that technological evidence, then what chance you really think we have of solving crimes where there is even less evidence available? One would have thought that this is perhaps one of the easier cases to solve. You don't have to have discussions about the angle at which the bullet entered the body, the trajectory of the bullet, so to decide whether or not the person was standing in Tiger Bay or somewhere else. None of those issues is a challenge. You have the man who is shot, the car that leaves, it drives up. Now, the model of the car is important, because the model tells you, perhaps the year that the car was imported into Guyana. We know, I believe, from the evidence is available, that 1,000 of that particular type of car that was imported into Guyana for a particular year. Then by a process of elimination, the police force have the resources. They can start to check and find out which of these cars cannot be accounted for. So we in Guyana, we're no longer a backwater country because we're now rich. We have foreigners. And just think about the security assessment any of the serious foreign investors will have to undertake if they're going to send people to live in Guyana to work in the oil industry. They're going to have to say, well, you clearly can't go to Palm Court because, this is what happens. But worse than that, their report will have to say that our law enforcement agency does not possess the capacity to solve what appears to be a particularly straightforward murder near the president's residence, where they have all this evidence, cameras, cell towers, unbelievable. Imagine, we don't even have to go to the White House. Imagine a murder like this taking place, close to the prime minister's residence in Trinidad or Jamaica, and they have all this technological advantage, and they don't solve it. It's over a year, and it's not been solved. That sends a particular message to the people who are either living, working, or operating in Guyana. So what happened here is there was a special team, a crack team from the Major Crime Department that was assigned to investigate. This team had at least 2 or 3 winners of Best Cop. They had Mr. Caesar himself, they had Mr. Sarabo, they had other, I would assume they would have assembled their best officers to crack this crime with the evidence that is available. We know that for sure it is a fact they have not solved the crime now. We know for sure that the relatives were particularly diligent. They hired lawyers, what have you. They were pursuing this and they assisted in the crime. We know where the car was found. We know how long it took the car to get there. And from the technological evidence that we have, we know that the persons who were in that car made calls to specified individuals at the time. Now, all of a sudden, somewhere in that mix, police officers get taken off the case and transferred to different locations. Some get even transferred out and then, they're brought back in. And Mr. Bascom was part of the team. Now, he made it very clear what he thought went on. Now, this was a prominent murder. So we have legislation that says, look, where you have a whistleblower that says, I was part of this team, and these are the things that happened. This was compromised, this didn't happen, this was stopped all of a sudden, and he was part of the team. Now, whether or not you believe him, that is a credible disclosure from an insider. All of us, I am sure, outside of the investigation, have views on what happened. But it's not what you think happened, it's what the evidence says. So you have now an individual who says, look, since February, long before this release he made last week, I made a report. I was told to go and arrest a particular suspect. When I arrived at the suspect's house, it is clear the suspect got a warning. He wasn't there. He was never arrested. The suspect subsequently called me and threatened me. And the lead investigator said to me, go make a report. He goes to Brickdown. Fortunately, he had the presence of mind to take the photograph because, as you know, Brickdown police station burned down shortly afterwards. And he gave a statement about being threatened. He also gave a very detailed statement at the same time, long before his exposure last week, Thursday, about all that was involved. And you would have thought that with something of this prominence in such a sensitive part of the capital, that there would have been some sort of increased level of attention. But let's come to where we are now. So you have a police officer of the rank of sergeant who makes serious allegations about compromises in the investigation and acts of which have frustrated it. Clearly, you can't ask the Guyana Police Force to investigate where the officers in charge are so high up the chain. You can't. Who is going to investigate them? Some junior officer. And what the act says is that and this is legislation, this is law, this is not we going and say, dear Mr. President, please provide security for this officer. The act says where you have a matter that touches national security, and this one must do is close to the president's house, the status of the people involved, where it took place, etc. The president has to convene a commission of inquiry. So we said, look, when I spoke to this guy who was absolutely petrified about his life, we wrote to the president and said, look, the act says in section 9, if you have this situation, whistleblower, this is what has to be done. Now, under the act, they should have set up this commission since 2018-19. Up to now, we don't have it. I heard that the minister, Mr. Ben, said they're still working on it. But here, you don't need the commission because the act specifically says the president must act. And under the same piece of legislation in section 20, they anticipate that persons who are whistleblowers, of course, are going to be in danger. They are going to automatically be in harm's way. Now, where you have a junior rank accusing very, very senior ranks in the Guyana Police Force of misfeasance and misbehavior in public office, he needs to get protected. Now, we know in Guyana, you're unlikely to be effectively protected. But one would have thought the immediate and first priority is the life of the whistleblower. Now, whether you believe Mr. Bascom or not, is going to be the subject of that commission of inquiry. We don't have to decide now. We're not asking the president to make a decision on the credibility of Mr. Bascom, because what the legislation says is where you have a whistleblower, it provides a process, and those persons who are responsible for conducting that investigation and listening to the evidence, they will hear Mr. Caesar, Mr. Bascom, Mr. Blanham, and whoever else is involved and wishes to give evidence. They will gather information that is independent of them, and they will say, yes, here, this is a problem. That's the purpose of having that commission. Not for anybody to make a judgment call about whether or not they believe Mr. Bascom or not. And the act clearly anticipates that there will be people who need protection. And that is precisely what we wrote to the president saying, here under the legislation, you have a man who is an insider, who is involved. He's made certain specific claims, which are in social media, about what happened during the course of this activity. It's not your duty, it's not your responsibility to determine the credibility of that. We're saying under the act, please establish commission of inquiry. And because of the level of these persons in the Guyana police force, they should either be peopled by regional police officers of some particular experience experience in law enforcement, or regionally or internationally. And we have a lot of friendly countries, including the United States of America, who must be concerned about a murder that happens outside a popular night spot opposite the president, because they have citizens who are living here. And they cannot continue to say, don't go here, or don't go to toilet at night. They must have some level of confidence in the ability of the law enforcement agencies to investigate. God forbid, if the victim was an American citizen, we know the reaction might have been different. But is the law, as a friendly government, is the United States going to say, oh, we're very comfortable with the fact that the Guyana police force is unable to solve a crime where they have cameras, they have cell towers, they have eyewitnesses, they can do the most basic calculations to find out, they can pick up these conversations, they can do what they want. And it's okay to say after a year with that technological advantage to say, we don't have a suspect, it's a cold case, let's wrap it up. Not acceptable, because then the American government, which issues travel advisories, if there just is an increasing crime in Tiger Bay, would be concerned, and any foreign government that is here, whether it's the British or the Canadians, they must have a legitimate, genuine concern about the safety of those citizens if they're going to nightclubs. This is not some dark deluge where you looking over your shoulder to go and do some sort of nefarious activity. This is the center of Georgetown with the president's residence nearby. And so it is important, I think, on many aspects, but particularly for Guyana's reputation, that one, we have an independent investigation into what is obviously the murder of Mr. Fergundes, and we have an independent investigation into the allegations that have been made by Mr. Bascom. Now, let's talk about Guyana culture and police force culture. One of the several options I suspect that the Guyana police force is likely to do, because they always do this when people embarrass them, is one, they will dismiss him from the force. So it's not in the interest of the force to have Mr. Bascom in the force. Now that has a particular signal to the criminal underworld, because once that uniform is removed from you, the criminal underworld will say, this is a legitimate target. And we know the rest. He still has the uniform and he's been threatened. So imagine if they took the decision to expel him from the police force. And the Guyana police force is not difficult beyond their capabilities to say, look, we're gonna find some appropriate charge. Last week, 2 years ago, you cussed up your mother, or 3 years ago, you slapped your daughter. Charge you. So that then puts an additional burden on the sergeant, and that is my concern about this guy's life. Because to me, if a citizen comes to you and says, Mr. President, I have information. The information I have is in some high-ranking people who have very long arms that could have a reach that average people don't have. My life is in danger. Surely, any president, even if he is lacking in compassion, should take steps to protect that person's life where he has made a legitimate, but it doesn't even have to be legitimate. He has made a complaint about the inability of the force and why it appears unable to solve a crime. Protect that life, because at the end of the day, the credibility of your country, the credibility of your law enforcement agency, the capacity of your law enforcement agency are all under great scrutiny. And not unlike Monica Reese, we rich, we can solve a basic crime in bright lights on a weekend or whenever it happened, close to the president's house. So what happens when there's something else? And here, unfortunately, is the kicker. Trinidad, Venezuela have criminals who operate at a level that is 10 times the level at which the criminals operate in Guyana. That's a fact. Whether you like it, don't like it, that's a fact. Wealth attracts criminal activity. That's also a fact. That's not a Guyana situation. Across the globe, if you have a concentration of rich people, you're going to have a concentration of criminals who try to rob rich people. If you can solve a basic crime where you have all that information, what happens when the more vicious, violent crimes that we see in Trinidad and Venezuela come together? Because they're going to come. What happens when they start kidnapping? If you can't find a killer who drove from Georgetown through all them cameras all the way up the single road up the East Bank, because not as if we got 6 roads, one single road. If you can't solve that, what happens when people say, oh, Guyanese rich, you know, X family, Y family, we're going to start snatching children. We're going to start to do X, Y, and Z. What are we going to do? We're going to say we ain't got the capacity, we can't solve crime, our hands against the wall, we don't want foreign intervention. We can't be a real country. We cannot, if we don't have the ability to protect our own citizens, what does it say? What does that say about us? And so Mr. Bascom's exposures are critical if we are to go forward as a country. It's not for me to advise the president, but what I can say to him is, Mr. President, you have a citizen whose life is in danger. If you allow the force to do the things they would normally do, which is put him out in the street, take away his firearm from the force, you know what's going to happen. That's like putting a bigger target. He's already got a target in his back. So let's see how we handle this.
Well said, Mr. Hughes. I know you have another engagement. I took the liberty to consult with the individual you're supposed to meet with to say that you were running a little bit late. And that's how we do things here. I have you for a few more minutes. We have a comment here, Mr. Hughes. It says here from Eon Williams, Mr. Hughes, that would not happen. And this is according to Mr. Williams, that Irfan Ali is in bed, I don't know, with suspects, allegedly. Now, you wrote as the Mr. Bascom's lawyer, says here, writes to Mr. Irfan Ali seeking protection for Bascom. Also wants independent probe of Fergundes murder. Before we get to the independence probe of Fergundes murder, you're calling on Mr. Irfan Ali to offer this guy to ensure that this guy, who's the cop, Mr. Bascom, to be part of the protection program, the witness protection program. But getting back to what Mr. Williams, Eon Williams, just alluded to, how optimistic are you that that would happen? Especially, it is public knowledge that Mr. Irfan Ali shares a very good relationship with the individual, one of the suspects, mind you, that is Mr. Azardine Ali. How optimistic that Mr. Irfan Ali would act to ensure that the policeman, Sergeant Bascom, is protected?
Mark, I have to believe, as a citizen, that we have a real country. That we have a country that at least the person who occupies the position of president is committed to the rule of law and is committed to ensuring that everybody, at least insofar as they are citizens and abide by the law, get the fair application of the law. I saw the comment by the person who says he's in bed with the president is in bed. I don't know. But what I would hope is that the president must have friends. I mean, whoever is the president, they would have friends. But it is the ability to separate your role as president of the country, particularly where you say you are president for everyone and you're committed to the rule of law, that you can say, even to the people who consider themselves your friends, that sorry, this is not happening on my watch. I understand how good we are. I know we used to kick football together, we play cricket together, but you cannot, if you are my friend, put me in a position where you hope and expect that I will act in your favor, contrary to the rule of law. But more importantly, if you put me in that position, I will act according to the rule of law, because I don't expect my friends to put me in that position. That would be, I believe, an approach that I would want to offer for consideration. So I don't really, I hear you asking me how optimistic I am, but I'm saying that is the approach I hope the president will take. One, that my friends don't put me in a position where they expect me to act in their favor. And if they have embarrassed me to such an extent, I am going to apply the rule of law, because that is what the presidency is about. Now, I don't want to comment and prejudice the actions of the president by saying whether I'm optimistic. I certainly have a view, but I don't think it would be appropriate at this point for me to share that view about my expectations in relation to the position the president is likely to adopt. What my responsibilities are to Mr. Bascom is to discuss all the potential positions the president may adopt, including one that says he disregards the application, and what the consequences of that would be for Mr. Bascom. For Mr. Bascom, so that he can take decisions that are in his best interest. One, first of all, to protect his life, and two, take decisions that allow him, as he has said this, he has made these revelations, that he may have to look elsewhere. Because if the president of the country refuses to protect you, then you got to go somewhere else. You got to go to other legitimate sources and say, this is where I am. Can you help me? And so that is where we are.
This is exactly where we are. It's 2 minutes after 10 o'clock. Have you heard from the office of the president? Anyone that's occupying it there? Have you heard from them since you have made this request?
No, I have not. Unless something came in some medium that I am unfamiliar with, no, I have not.
What about an independent probe in all these revelations we've heard of, allegations and so forth? And in some cases, we have seen some form of evidence that this detective actually wanted to do the right thing, and it was not done. Your optimism about an independent probe?
You see, Mark, again, it's not that I'm dodging that, but this is what I want to offer to you.
Sure.
If I say to you, I am not optimistic, the president may say, well, what should lie in optimistic? So why are you going to give you a probe? If I say I am optimistic, the president will say, oh, you feel you're a bad man, you're going to get probed? No, you ain't getting a probe. So I prefer to offer no comment. And I will only say to you, Mark, if you look at the data historically in Guyana in these situations, you will find the answer to that question.
Of course, we'll find an answer. In closing, your client is in a safe spot. He is safe thus far. How concerned are
No,
you for
my
his
client,
safety?
no, I don't know if he's in a safe spot. My client is alive so far.
Yeah,
I can't say,
I
I can't
got you.
comment about safety. I can only say he's alive.
How concerned are you that there is this high possibility because he's dealing, we're seeing and dealing with individuals who are powerful economically, lots and lots of money, and we have seen in the past that people with lots and lots of money can do all sort of things. How concerned are you as it pertains to his safety? Again, I know you touched on that, but in closing.
Um, Mark, Mr. Bascom does not have the means to buy himself the physical protection that can guarantee his safety. He does not have those economic means. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in Guyana who are even moderately wealthy don't have the means, if they found themselves in this position, to buy that level of security. That, there's a certain level of security that will increase your chances of staying alive. Mr. Bascom is a sergeant of police. Um, he doesn't have that means. But you know, let me not say Ghana is an interesting place. Let me just say that.
Interesting indeed. Your closing remarks, please, Mr. Hughes.
I hope we as a country we appreciate how critical and important it is to have this public inquiry, independent inquiry, people by persons outside of Guyana, into Mr. Fergundes' death and into these allegations. There's legislation that provides for it. It's not as if we're begging the president to do something that is not legally possible, but it's actually legally mandated under the Act. And so I hope that he does that. And further, I hope that because we have found ourselves here, that we have, as a matter of urgency, a Protected Disclosures Commission established so that other people who want to become whistleblowers actually can come, get the witness protection. They take them out of the country, they relocate them somewhere else. The Caribbean itself is a small place. And so that we can actually begin to establish in our country institutions that people begin to feel confident in, particularly if it's a law enforcement institution. That's where I'd leave it.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Hughes. Head to your other appointment. We wish you the best, and thank you so much for always standing up and picking up these cases when some others are just a little bit too reluctant for them. We wish you all the best. Give our regards to Mr. Bascom, and we continue to pray for his safety. Thank you, Nigel. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and may I say, have a blessed and quiet and peaceful evening.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nigel Hughes there for you guys. We will spend another couple of minutes, and I just wanted to bring to your attention a couple of things that is pertaining to Mr. Bascom. Mr. Bascom's lawyer has said to one lawyer representing all three of the individuals who serious allegations have been leveled against them. Caesar, he's a superintendent of police, serious allegations leveled against Caesar. And these allegations that we are hearing about are nothing that we are not accustomed to in terms of allegations leveled against Caesar. It has been happening for years. He seems to be someone who has 9 lives, cat lives that is, always slipping through the crack. And so with this latest allegations by Mr. Bascom, Caesar has rushed to sue Mr. Bascom. And then this guy, Azardine Mohammed, you guys know who he is, right? He likes to make it known that he's a rich guy. I don't know, these rich, quote unquote, rich people, overnight rich people feel that they're so powerful, right? And so Azardine rushed, the same lawyer that Caesar is using. Somebody's got to be paying that lawyer. And then the other suspect that was not turning himself into the police, who allegedly threatened Mr. Bascom during the course of the investigation, suddenly decided that he is going to sue for $100 million. And oh my gosh, how dare Mr. Bascom talk these things and so forth. So they all use the same lawyer to sue a man who probably could barely, a policeman could barely scrape up little Polari money in an attempt to silence him, to say, look, shut up, don't say anything else. But the evidence, I'm sure Mr. Bascom will continue to provide his lawyer with all of the evidence, phone conversation, phone shots, screenshots, report made that he was threatened. All of these things, I'm sure the lawyer has more and more and more. Some of us may have a few, including the mechanic shop where it is alleged that Azardine, Azardine's mechanic, we're seeing cars there, burnt up cars. We're seeing a bunch of other things. These are just a few things that we have seen. And the other key thing is that I've asked Mr. Nigel Hughes about any seriousness towards a probe in this matter, knowing that Mr. Hughes has called on Nigel, Mr. Hughes has called on Irfan Ali to protect, to offer Mr. Bascom the protection that he deserves. I am not optimistic at all. Irfan Ali is not going to offer any protection, none whatsoever. It's a total waste of time. Irfan Ali will stand by the side of his friend right there. He will stand at the side by his friends because he ain't gonna forget things, maybe favors. Who knows? I don't know. But it is Irfan Ali has to say whether he got a couple of vehicles from this guy, Azardine, and these sort of things, right? So there is a statement here by the acting commissioner of police. Lots of things happening. Before we go, I want to read this statement here coming out from the statement from the commissioner of police on the matter of Dion Bascom. Bear with me, please, as I read this out. It says, Police Sergeant Dion Bascom has over recent days made a number of public, wholly unsubstantiated allegations. Now, wait a minute. There's no investigations. There's nothing yet. But here it is. The police, the acting police commissioner is coming out to rubbish what Mr. Bascom has said. He said unsubstantiated. Now, somebody has told him that he got to go out and speak. I don't know whether he's friends with some of those so-called powerful people who love to pomposette with their wealth. I don't know. But let me continue to let you guys hear what the acting police commissioner has said in this release. He continues. Sergeant Bascom has refused to submit himself to any investigation. Mr. Bascom, and I hope the commissioner, the acting commissioner of police is watching and listening. Mr. Bascom has not refused to submit himself for any investigation into the matter. He has not refused. He is saying that he doesn't believe that he will get any justice from you guys, Mr. Higgins. That is what he's saying. He's not refusing. He says he wants to talk. He wants an independent probe, that the police cannot investigate the police. How many times have we heard about investigations over allegations made about senior ranks and so forth? So, Mr. Commissioner acting, do not lie. Mr. Bascom has not made any statement that he is refusing. He says he do not trust the system. So let me continue here now. It is not without significance that Sergeant Bascom found himself personally compromised. Now here it is. Here it is again. Wait a minute. Let's take this guy Higgins off for a moment. You guys see where this is heading, right? You see where this is heading. that Mr. Bascom found himself in a situation where he was compromised. He was in a yard. Everybody was in a yard. Mr. Bascom was there. Kanu made a quick sweep. And I'm kind of surprised that Kanu was there. They picked him up. They picked up everybody. They knew he was a cop. They knew he was a detective, of course, undercover. But yet they arrested him. They published his photograph and all manner of things to make it appear that he was part of that big so-called drug bust. And mind you, with the drug bust, we only see a particular set of people who are being targeted. But the drug lords and the money launderers and the gold smugglers, they're still there. They're not being targeted. They're being crowned with all manner of things. Now, let's continue here now with, what's his name? Hicken, and Hicken's foolish statement at this time. Now, Sergeant Bascom, that's according to Hickens here. Sergeant Bascom, at his request, is currently at home on sick leave. All right, so big deal. He's at home on sick leave. It is unfortunate that Sergeant Bascom's unfounded allegations, and now, unfounded allegations. He's not saying allegations, Hicken is saying unfounded. Some PVP lawyer probably wrote this here, right? Unfounded allegations have publicly involved senior members of the force and other persons. Well, the other person that Hicken is talking about is Mark Richmond and this guy, Azardine Mohammed. So you can name them. You can name them, Hicken. Name them, call their names. Mark Richmond and Azardine Mohammed. Name them. And Caesar. Name them. Don't be afraid. Name them. Don't be one-sided in this investigation. You guys see where this is headed, right? And you guys now understand why there cannot be a fair investigation by the Guyana Police Force. Mr. Hicken is exposing himself here. Now let's continue. Sergeant Bascom's public statement made while serving as an active member. Look, I just got this. I ain't finished reading it yet. But we all know where this is heading. That they have dismissed. I can put my head on the block that they dismissed Bascom. They're not going to call for an investigation. They're not going to send Caesar on leave. They're not going to try to find the suspect who happens to be a security guard at Azardine, whatever his name is, Mohammed's Mohammed's enterprise or whatever they call themselves, right? They're not going to go to pick those guys up to question them as to whether the allegations are, or question them about the allegations, mind you. They're not going to pick up that suspect who is a close security associate of Azardine Mohammed. They're not going to pick those guys up. But you see what's happening here now. You guys see where this is heading, right? They're targeting this guy, this little chips, this small fries. This guy who basically had a job as a policeman and he wanted to do what was right. Forget about whatever other people said by pick up people tennis roll and thing. That's irrelevant right now. This is a big probe we're talking about. But here it is, the acting commissioner of police has made a decision already that this guy's allegations is basically rubbishing everything and siding with those that are accused, siding with the suspects in this major cover-up of a murder probe and murder. Allegations, mind you, made by Mr. Dion Bascom. He has provided some level of what we may consider evidence that could lead to more stuff. But as a commissioner of police acting, a senior police officer, and someone who has been in the force for over 25 years is making this sort of assertion and leaning on the side of the alleged culprits. Now let's continue. Sergeant Bascom public statements made while serving as an active member of the Guyana Police Force is in breach. There we go. There we go. Caesar is not allegedly in breach. Azardine Mohammed is not allegedly in breach. Or nothing. Absolutely nothing. Mark, whatever. Richmond They can't arrest him. But you see who is in breach? A small fries detective who exposed them based on these serious allegations. They have to come up with this statement in order to make the guy, the victim that we're seeing here now, the judicial system and police force, we're seeing that this detective is now the real victim outside of justice for a man who was gunned down. Listen, let's continue here now. That the detective is active member of the Guyana police force is in breach of the code of conduct of the police force. I have, as a result, ordered an immediate investigation of this matter by the Office of Professional Responsibility, the OPR. Again, Mr. Bascom is saying he doesn't trust them. The OPR has submitted the findings of their investigation along with their recommendation, which is now before the Director of Public Prosecution. So basically what he's saying is that it is now in the hands of the Director of Public Persecution or Prosecution or whatever they want to say, headed by CIOG member, Mr. Shalimar Hack, who is a member of the CIOG. And I'm sure that these guys, the Mohammeds, they are also, they could possibly be members of that very organization, could possibly be. So what do you guys think of this whole situation? Mr. Hicken, through his statement, has already, in an attempt, and maybe not so subtle, to discredit Mr. Bascom, prejudicing this entire report, as he claimed, sent to the DPP. It appears that the decision Mr. Hicken, is trying to prejudice the outcome of this investigation and the decision by the Director of Public Prosecution. Only in Guyana these things can happen, right? Only in Guyana. Meanwhile, look at this. The cop was threatened. He made a statement. Nothing has happened. The suspect is still next to his boss, Azardine Mohammed. The police hasn't arrested the suspect. The police hasn't questioned the suspect, but they're going after the whistleblower. How safe you think the whistleblower is? How safe is Mr. Dion Bascom? In my opinion, he is not safe. He's dealing with people who are powerful overnight and so forth. And when you deal with powerful people, anything can happen. I'm not saying that or saying that anybody is going to pay anybody to eliminate this guy. But all I'm saying is that when you're dealing with powerful people, anything can happen, especially in Guyana. And that is why Mr. Hughes asked for protection, but he's asking the wrong person for protection. Irfan Ali is not going to offer any help to the detective Bascom, none whatsoever, because were he to do that, he will be going against his friend, Azardine Mohammed, the overnight Santa Claus in Guyana. Overnight Santa Claus. Irfan Ali wouldn't be going after his friend, Azardine Mohammed. And so poor Bascom has to continue to fight for justice in public domain. Folks like us have to be the one to continue to keep this case alive and to ensure that Mr. Bascom himself stays alive. By tomorrow, I am almost certain that Irfan Ali will issue a statement. When you read between the lines, you'll understand that he had absolutely nothing else to say. He had no other choice to make it appear that he wants an investigation. But when he says that, remember he said it about Sue. There's nothing. Remember he said Elections Commission. He wants a commission of inquiry and all these different things. He's just yap, 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 yap. He's a yapper. And all he thinks he can do is gaff his way out of a situation. Meanwhile, the family for Fergundes still wants justice. And instead of getting justice, the police force, the PPP, and those suspects have given the entire nation, including the mother and daughter of Ricardo Fergundes and other relatives and friends of Ricardo Fergundes, have given everyone, the middle finger. That's what Guyana has turned to under the corrupt, racist, and criminal PPP regime. Criminal PPP regime. Beautiful Guyana, huh? Some may rush on their page now to quote scriptures and all manner of things, or rush to dole out donations and all manner of things, or their friends may hold umbrella for them. We here on 107.1 FM and straight up especially will be watching, especially with what some of the evidence given to us in our possession. Over to you, Mr. Irfan Ali. Over to you. We've got to pray for Guyana, and we've got to pray for this victim of a corrupt police department and an equally corrupt regime. See you guys tomorrow. Same place, same time. God bless you all.
Hello, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington law firm located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
What is the difference between the ordinary thief and a political thief? Number one, the ordinary thief steals your money, your bag, your watch, and your jewelry, isn't it? But the political thief steals your future, your career, your education, your health, and your business. Number two, the hilarious part is that the ordinary thief will choose whom to rob. But you are the one who choose the political thief to rob you. Because which